Hello, gear nerds of the internet. The Quicksilver audio line preamplifier. Let's talk about it.
Six in the morning.
Okay, so I bought this because I found it for a really nice price on a message board. And it is a tube preamp from Quicksilver Audio. Maybe we should talk about what a line preamplifier is. What does a line preamplifier designate? Well, it means basically that it doesn't have a phono preamp built in. Line preamplifier means that it's just all line level inputs. So there you go. That's what that means. Mystery solved. So they've been making this thing for a while. There's a couple of different iterations of this. This one, I would guess, is from like the early 2000s or maybe the late 90s. The newer one that you'll see will have the power and then the tape monitor. But there's other functions. This one here, right only, left only, and the mono switch have been removed. It seems like, you know, this is all sort of archaic at this point. If you look at older preamplifiers, there was a ton of different options with mono and different ways to configure your channels and tape monitors and all kinds of stuff. Well, tape monitors are great if you have a tape deck. However, you could still do stuff with that tape monitor. So they've kept that, and I don't know why. I think ideally you'd probably want a mono switch, considering how much stuff is coming out in mono these days, over a tape monitor. But that's not completely useless, and we'll talk about why when we get to the back of this. So this has a stepped volume control. The pot has little steps. Some people might not like that. A lot of people get anal about, well, I want it in between here, and I can't get the volume that I want. What are you going to do? I don't have a problem with that. I think it's fine. You have your options of video, aux, CD, tuner, which they're all essentially the same because, again, it's a line preamplifier. So it's all line level inputs. The right only, left only, if you keep it in the middle, it's your normal stereo. I'm guessing that this is like used for diagnostics. I don't know what else you would want to use that for. You know, to make sure that your balance is right. There is no balance pot, so I think most people would use a balance pot for diagnostics anyway, and that, I guess, kind of does the same thing. You have your tape monitor on and off, and then your mono stereo, which is nice. Like I said, a lot of preamps these days don't include that, and I think that should make a comeback. Let's lobby for that. On the back, you have your inputs. You have a tape input. You have a tape output and your main output. And then your power and 12 amp fuse. This is made in America, in Reno, Nevada. So let's talk about tape out and tape in. So back in the bad old days of cassettes or reel-to-reels, you would want to record from some other source onto your cassette. And so what you would do is you would have your cassette deck here. You would go from tape out into the input of your cassette deck, and then from your output of your cassette deck into the tape in. So what this does is this sends any of this signal always to these two outputs, the tape output and the main output. The main output is variable based on your potentiometer. However, this is at a fixed setting, your tape output. So even if you didn't want to use this for tape output, you could use this for other things, like sending this to some sort of recording device, or you could send this to some digitizer, or you could send this to a subwoofer even. And then the tape input would be accessible through your tape monitor switch. So if your tape monitor is off and you're listening to the CD, your CD is getting routed out through the tape out all the time, but you would only hear what's coming in from the tape if you turn the tape monitor on. And at that point, you're getting the audio from the output. So one of the things you could use this for, if you don't have a tape, but you do have an equalizer, you can put your equalizer in there. If you think about having an equalizer, you would have an input and an output on that, and then you would maybe put it on your CD player, or let's say that your aux is designated as your turntable. You could only have it on one. Well, if you have something with a tape monitor and a tape input and output, you could have your EQ set up, and then when you turn the tape monitor on, now you have it going through the EQ. Now you're EQing everything. Everything here is potentially EQable. I hope that makes sense. If not, put something down below. I'll try to explain that better. This is a tube-based preamp, and it has a whole lot of screws. And they're these tiny little Allen screws. So good luck losing those. You're in trouble. And there is not much to this. It's a pretty basic circuit. You have two 12AX7s. On the newer ones, this now uses 12AT7s, which is 70% of the gain of a 12AX7. You have mostly electrolytic capacitors. You have these two big poly caps. And then you have a couple of solid-state devices in here. You have that, and then you have your solid-state rectifiers, and then you have a little op-amp right there. I don't know what that does. And then, you know, you have your transformer and a choke, whatever. So the volume pot is an Alps 100K AX2, made in Japan pot. And then you have your switch. So there's not a lot to this, which means that you can keep this thing forever. This thing you can hand down to your children's children, because anything in here that breaks, with the exception of maybe the power transformer, but I'm sure you can probably get that. If not easily, you can still probably get it. 12AX7s are ubiquitous and inexpensive. I have a bucket of those things. And these electrolytic capacitors are all common values. Fixing this is super easy, and it has a screw-on bottom that you can remove, and then you can solder or desolder without having to pull the board out, which makes it super easy to service. It's really well designed. When you power this on, you'll see this light is red as it's warming up. You will also notice these two incandescent bulbs back here. Those, I'm not sure what those are doing, but as you can see, they go off after a while. If you were to unplug one of these tubes, you would see that it lights up. So it's doing something with the tubes. As you can see, we're still waiting for it. And now it's green. Now it's in operation mode. And so now if we turn it off, that goes off. And after a few seconds, those incandescent bulbs light up again. I don't know what that means. I've reached out to QUICKSILVER via email. I got no response. However, it is the holidays, so I will assume the best, that maybe they'll respond after the holidays. We'll see. I like this form factor better than the Schiit Freya. I think aesthetically this is more pleasing. Aesthetically this goes with my Rogue Stealth Phono preamp, because this is your 19-inch standard rack size unit with your rounded corners, where this is, you know, the Freya is the aesthetic of Schiit audio, which you either love or love less, I suppose. This thing has features that this doesn't. Mostly that this has a remote, this does not. You could always get this with a remote nowadays. This also has balanced inputs and outputs. But then it also has RCA outputs as well. So the Quicksilver has a very neutral sound. It's maybe just a little mid-forward, maybe. Otherwise, the soundstage is good. Rolling the tubes doesn't get you super far. I've noticed that most of the tubes sound pretty much the same, whether it's vintage Mullards or a modern tube. I've even tried 12AT7s and 12AU7s. I found that other than that you have to turn the volume up a little more with the AU and AT7s, there's really not much of a sonic difference. I found one set of tubes that were GEs that sound less thick in the low mids, whereas normally the other 12AX7s that I've tried have more of a slightly more syrupy. I wouldn't say this is super tube sounding though. I would say this is pretty neutral. Compared to this sonically, this has a narrower soundstage by a little bit. It doesn't extend out as far. This guy is pretty silent, but not quite as quiet as this guy. This thing is super quiet compared to this, and both of them are quiet compared to the Manley Shrimp preamp that I had. I would say that the Manley sounded better than both of these, maybe depending on what you want to hear. The Manley had a bigger soundstage than this, maybe a little bit, but it had a thicker, more palpable sound than both of these. This has low mid punch that this one doesn't have. This one also has, since it's less noise, it has a blacker background, which makes everything kind of pop a little bit more than this. Maybe a little bit. I found that if I use this with my subwoofer, which I don't normally use, when I was using the Manley, I never turned on my subwoofer, but with this I noticed that if I turn my subwoofer on, I feel like I have the thicker sound that I had with the Manley. And I guess the same could be said for this too. So I would say that these things maybe don't sound identical, but depending on what tubes you use with either of these two things, you can get them to sound pretty close. I find that with the mid-range on this is a bit more recessed than this, so I find that I want to turn this one up louder. And then also with the slight rolled off mids and the smaller soundstage, I find that a little less pleasing than this. If I had to keep one and sell one, which I'll probably keep one or sell one, or maybe both, because I have another preamp coming in a couple days. Don't tell my wife. I think I would pick this one almost purely based on aesthetics. I think for me, sonics between these two is sort of a toss-up. They both sound good. I do find myself finding this one a little bit more enjoyable than this one. I'm not sure why, but purely aesthetics, that it looks nicer compared to, I think, this. I don't love the look of this. And like I said, this matches better with my preamp. I think I would keep this and let this go. If you're in the market for a Freya original preamp down there. Quicksilver, do you have one? Do you have Quicksilver gear? This is the first thing that I bought from Quicksilver. I'm fairly impressed with it. It's pretty good. Let me know what you think. If you want to watch other videos, I have a video here. I have a video there. I'll have a video here. Subscribe, like if you want. Or dislike, either way. Please don't dislike. That kind of hurts my heart. There you go. Check out my Instagram. I'll have a picture of what the next preamp is. I think it's going to be pretty sweet. Maybe, like I said, maybe I'll sell both of these and keep that one. Take it easy.